a lot of truth behind conspiracies. And I mean, they don't start from anywhere. It would just be called disinfo. The fact of it being a conspiracy means there's a lot of truth, just nobody will verify it. There's no official verification. And so, yeah, they throw those words out to scare people off from questioning government tactics and military tactics and things that are really going on behind the scenes, because they don't want people aware of what's going on. They want you back on your couch watching Sunday football and leaving them alone. They want the population clueless. And so that's why we have radio shows like this. I'll bring this stuff up, talk about it the best I can, for as long as I can. We know we're not always going to have time on the air to talk. Tribulation period's coming closer and closer. Lord says time's over as we know it, that things are going to start happening, and once they start happening, it's going to happen like a flood. And that happens all at once. And so I'm looking through all of this information over the last 2 months, and I told you back in July that it would switch back over to the New World Order faction for the months of September and October. And it has, and so that's what we're looking at, I'm looking at. And, the stuff with the threats of going to war with Iran haven't gone away. Syria's kind of been not mentioned as much, so it makes you wonder. They throw Iran at you. You don't know if it's conditioning because they really plan on going after Iran. And with Syria is really their target, or vice versa. There's no weapons of mass destruction in Iran, and it's the same hogwash and the same garbage they fed us about Iraq. The UN inspectors already said Iran isn't close to having weapons of mass destruction. And, President Bush's whole argument is, well, they one day could. And you want to sacrifice your kids for a probability, or even a possibility, or a theoretic? I mean, come on, folks, haven't you sacrificed enough in Iraq? I like Cindy Sheehan's statements where she said, for pro-war people, why don't you go take our soldiers' places in Iraq and let the ones who want to come home, come home? And that's fitting. If you're so pro-war in Iraq, you're so for this war in Iraq, go take some soldiers' place so he can come home. Because I'll tell you what, a big chunk of that military no longer supports the war over there. There's a huge mutiny going on behind the scenes that the daily media isn't going to tell you about. When you start seeing generals in a wartime, especially one that's separated from his wife and then being kicked out of the army for adultery, they're false charges. Or that they're talking about generals painting graffiti on cars and parking lots. I mean, give me a break. When you start seeing generals in a wartime getting kicked out of the army, a serious mutiny is taking place, and whatever reason they're giving you is a bunch of hogwash. And that's exactly what's going on. And the military is going to stand up. There's only so much they're going to take. They know that they don't have the numbers to continue the war in Iraq. They keep dwindling and dwindling. They wouldn't listen to the military leaders when they went into Iraq. And I was reading something with President Bush the other day, back when his comments about the Vietnam War, and his statement saying that we lost the Vietnam War because the politicians got involved with it and took the control and power out of the military leadership hands. Well, what are we doing in Iraq here? And we've tied our military leaders' hands, and the politicians have taken charge of it. And so it's the same scenario, and it's going to end up with the same outcome, only this one is much worse. This one's going to be much worse because they have no plans of bringing your kids home. In Vietnam, they brought your kids home. In Iraq, they don't plan to. It was their whole push to gain dominance, their imperialistic control of the Middle East, that Americans have never been imperialistic. We've never been the type that we have to dominate the world. America was just happy being home in America. And you know what? They keep throwing out this garbage that we have to protect our homeland from terrorists. They absolve the current government, re-elect a new one, and we get rid of all the terrorists because it wasn't Iraqis or towelheads or Arabs or anybody that attacked our towers here on American soil. It was our own government. They planned it, they implemented it, and then they blamed it on somebody else because they wanted a foothold in the Middle East. And it was, it was the government. There's a huge lawsuit still going on with the families of New York who have finally been waking up slowly to the fact that the government was involved with 911. Huge lawsuit against them. You don't hear a lot about it in the daily media. You'll hear about it on the internet, but you're not going to hear about real news from Fox News or CBS or ABC. They're all owned by the government, the CIA, and between the CIA and the Mossad, they own all the news networks. And they even have one now that they've put up a studio in the Pentagon. So you can get your propaganda straight from the Pentagon now, in a makeshift newsroom in the Pentagon. It's not news, it's propaganda. And some of you have seen some of these videos coming out, these propaganda videos. Sometimes you don't know if you're waking up in America or if you're waking up in Russia. I mean, it's a real fine line, real thin difference anymore between it. And so obviously you're not being told the truth. And, we could very well be at war in September, October, because the plans have already gone out that if there is another terrorist attack here in America, which there will be, and they keep telling you there will be because they're planning it. When there is, Cheney, Vice President Dick Cheney, has given the military direct orders to strike Iran, whether they're involved with it or not. And so, they're planning it. They're planning an attack here. They've been threatening since 9/11 that there would be another attack here. And we know there is, because they're planning it. They've sent out directives all over the place for the military to come up with scenarios on how to work more terrorist attacks here in America. Supposedly scenarios they're giving is 3 strikes, simultaneous attacks on 3 cities at one time, or even up to 15. And so they're working with the Pentagon on what the civilian response and the military response would be if these attacks took place. So they're just preparing. And one of the things I found interesting is that, this is reported in the Washington Post on August 8th, is that what they've done is a lot of people say that it's the Posse Comitatus Act that prohibits the military from acting on civilian soil. Well, they have gone around the Posse Comitatus Act to justify the military acting on civilian soil because of Article 2 of the Constitution that requires the commander-in-chief to protect the nation. And so they can use that the one phrase where he's committed treason all over for the last 4 years on protecting the nation, to use troops on our own soil. And so they're going around everything. They're finding loopholes in everything because the Posse Comitatus Act of 1878 restricts the use of troops in domestic law enforcement. But what they're going to do is say, well, the commander-in-chief is required to protect the nation, so they're going to go around it and use troops in that regard. The other thing they've done is they're expanding the National Guard, I think up to 128 units across the country. They've been expanding the National Guard. And so that's one other way that they're going to use troops here in America. And, National Guard's always been a civilian, more or less, type of military. And so that's what they would do. Go to the National Guard, put that under the control of Homeland Security, and have their troops their way in through that. I mean, they're not necessarily going to be looking for legalisms. I mean, they do what they want, and they justify later. And we've been seeing that for 4 years now. If the commander-in-chief is required by law to protect the nation, where was he on 9/11? Why was he behind the planning of it? So you ask yourself these questions. They just look at the Constitution and laugh at it, and they spit all over it, and they're going to keep doing it. Listener call-in line 260-356-2611 if you have any comments or questions. And it looks like Bush was in Salt Lake City this week. He's defending the war in Iraq on Monday out at Salt Lake City. And this is one of the things, these asinine statements he makes. He says we must confront threats before they fully materialize. Bush said in a speech at the National Convention of the Veterans of Foreign Wars. It's like, I'm not going to finish reading that then, but that's what he said. It was most asinine. We must confront threats before they fully materialize. This is one of these theoretic things. I have that movie, I can't remember what it's called, where you're arrested beforehand for thinking that you're going to do something illegal. I think Tom Cruise starred in that movie. That's what it reminds me of. You think you're doing something illegal and you're arrested. It's just asinine. And he already states that his policy for the war, he doesn't have an exit strategy, stay the course, is what he repeatedly says. And of course, that's not a policy. That's just, stay the course. They're going to stay the course. And then on the other hand, he'll say that they don't have, that they're going to start pulling out, or he speaks out of both sides of his mouth. Wish I could find that one quote.